conceptions and get you on the path to getting great results. For a little bit of housekeeping, you'll notice on your panel on the screen that you can ask us questions. Feel free to do that at any time. We will have some formal question breaks through the presentation, but if you have a question as we're going along, by all means type it in. If it's appropriate for right when we're talking about that subject, we will include it on our answer. And that's the beauty of being live here. Our webinar today is sponsored by Blurb and x-rite, two companies dedicated to providing accurate and consistent image reproduction. I'm your presenter. My name is Joe Brady. I'm the Field Marketing and Seminar Manager at the MAC Group in Elmsford, New York. I am a photographer and book creator myself. I'm a member of the Professional Photographers of America, and I hold the PPA Photographic Craftsman degree. So I do a lot of the same things you do, and I use these products frequently. So what is Blurb and why are we here today? Blurb is a company and a community. It believes passionately in the joy of books, as do I. Today we're going to discuss how to get the best color possible from all the photographs that you include in your books. And here's what we're going to cover. By understanding how to best prepare and edit your images, the quality and consistency of your Blurb books will be outstanding. We'll begin with your computer's display. Your monitor is one of the most important components for anyone editing digital files. We'll discuss if it is helping or hindering your efforts and how to make it perform to the best of its ability with calibration and profiling. Next, color spaces often get confused with profiles. We'll talk about what part they play in the color workflow and what has to happen to put your photos in the best format for printing. For you to really see how your image is going to print before sending it out to a lab or to your desktop printer or to Blurb, you need to know how to softproof in Photoshop. This step will eliminate most of the unexpected and sometimes unwelcome surprises. And finally, we'll make sure we've done everything necessary to send out a completed book to Blurb, either by using Blurb Booksmart or a publishing software like Adobe's InDesign. So the biggest issue we're dealing with is we capture images in RGB. We edit RGB images in Photoshop, but the printer used for printing books at Blurb operates in CMYK. When we're going out to our desktop printers, RGB is usually what they're looking for. By learning how to create files adjusted to the correct color space, we'll get more accurate and consistent results when we have books printed. The goal is to produce consistent color on different devices. That's what color management is. Unfortunately, each device has its own way of producing, capturing, or representing color. Cameras and monitors work in RGB, as we mentioned, while our prints are produced with CMYK inks. By creating and using color profiles, we have a way for each of these devices to talk to each other and make any translations necessary for color in one place to match color on another device as closely as possible. We also need to understand that since each device has a different range or gamut of colors that can be produced, we need to understand that, for example, a color we see on the monitor may not be able to be printed exactly. With the ability of current digital camera technology, we can also capture much more color range than our monitors can display. But don't despair, we can get this under control by using profiles, and with soft proofing we can see how a print will look before actually being printed. So how do you accomplish this? First of all, start thinking about it right at capture. If your color temperature and white balance is set correctly at capture, much less processing and editing will be necessary later. If your monitor is not calibrated and profiled, then none of your editing decisions concerning color and tonal range are going to be correct. And also, as I mentioned earlier, understanding how to softproof is critical to making informed color and tonal range editing decisions. We'll talk a bit about color spaces and how to ensure that any necessary conversions provide you with the best results. Also, so that you don't have to take extremely copious notes while we're doing this presentation today, at the end we will provide you with links on how you can download the presentation with notes as a PDF file, and a PDF on color workflow for photography that has screen captures and step-by-step directions on how to accomplish that. So let's take a look at capture. A gray or white card, or even better, a color checker placed in a scene will allow you to color balance for that particular scene and easily apply that reference to all the other images shot in the same lighting conditions. Simply include the card once during each change of location or lighting. It's true that raw files do not have an embedded white balance, but if they're captured with the correct white balance, it leaves one less variable to correct for. Even though the color temperature hasn't been embedded into the file, having this set correctly at capture will greatly speed up your workflow. If you can't custom white balance, choose a color temperature that matches the ambient light the best. For example, if it's sunny, cloudy, or shadowy, choose that white balance setting. Stay away from auto white balance. Auto white balance on digital cameras recalculates white or neutral for every shot. This often results in a slightly different white for each image. If you've ever tried to create a panoramic image composed of multiple shots, you can see this when the sky color just doesn't quite match from image to image. If you're consistently off, say for example you had your white balance set for sunny but it was cloudy out, or if you'd like your image to be adjusted to a little warmer, it's easier for you and or your lab to correct, and you can make a master change to a whole set of images rather than have to edit each individual shot. Before you do any editing, you've got to have a monitor that's been calibrated and profiled. Having a monitor that accurately shows you the correct tonality, contrast, and color that is in your image is one of the most important pieces in any color workflow. Most every monitor will benefit from being calibrated and profiled, so let's explore this a bit more. The terms calibration and profiling often get mixed and confused, but they do mean two different things. Calibration means establishing the basic parameters for the display. This includes brightness, color temperature, and gamma, or the contrast curve. For example, the standards for most monitors are 120 candelas per meter squared, that's the brightness or luminance level, 6500K for a color temperature, and a gamma of 2.2. These settings apply to both Windows and Macintosh platforms. Let's talk a bit more about brightness and color temperature settings, as opinions differ here. Monitor brightness or luminance is very important to anyone sending out files for printing. Most every monitor is set way too bright right out of the box. While this might make DVDs and the internet look bright and full of contrast, it artificially lightens shadows in images compared to the data in the actual file. The result is prints that come back much darker than the image you viewed on your monitor. This is one of the most common complaints we hear about. By setting your monitor luminance around 120 or even lower, you will view a much more accurate representation of the actual data in your image file and be able to make edits that will print more true to the image on your display. If you're working in an environment that has controlled lighting, even better if the ambient light is dimmer than your monitor, a setting between 80 and 100 will present the truest depiction of your image with the best color, contrast, and overall tonality. There's been a lot of debate about monitor color temperature settings as well. Without getting too technical, most monitors come out of the box with a native white point or color temperature of either 6500K or 9300K, both of which are much bluer than the 5000K pre-press standard. While it's true that Adobe Photoshop soft proofs, assuming you are viewing your prints under 5000K lighting, monitors set to 6500K more closely match prints viewed under those conditions. Remember, monitors are backlit RGB devices, and prints are reflecting the ambient light, and this is in some part what accounts for the difference. The other problem that a 5000K color setting can cause a monitor is that it's not the native white point for most monitors. If you need to adjust a 9300K monitor all the way down to 5000K, you might be able to successfully achieve that mid-tone, but the resulting changes in the color curves would throw off the colors in the darker tones, sometimes considerably. We have tested this many times by viewing the same image on a 6500K monitor right next to a 5000K viewing booth, and have consistently found that a 6500K, around 100 to 120 candela, 2.2 gamma monitor matches prints in a 5000K viewing booth. So we've got our calibration standards set. Next we have to profile. Profiling means creating a known response for how colors are displayed on your monitor. In essence, a set of corrections to ensure your monitor displays the correct colors for known values. You can't do this by eye. You need hardware and software to do this. Your eye is too quick to adapt to different temperature light and is fooled by brightness and color relationships. How many of you out there think you have a good monitor? Chances are your monitor is at best okay. While the i1 Display 2 and ColorMonkey Photo will both calibrate and profile any monitor to perform at its most accurate, you need to understand that many monitors are very contrasty, overly bright, and sometimes way too blue, even more so than can be completely corrected for. As we spoke about earlier, your monitor is your window to your digital world. It's an integral part of your color workflow, and it's critical that the image you see on the screen accurately reflects the color data in your image file. If it doesn't, how can you possibly make an editing decision? For many photographers and people who edit their photos, the monitor is the weak link in their color workflow. Photographers are willing to invest in good lenses to get the best capture. A good monitor is just as important for image editing. If you're capturing images with a $2,400 camera body with a $1,300 lens and doing your editing on a $179 monitor, where do you think the weak link might be? You need hardware and software to do this. Our eyes are very adaptable to light and color and will compensate to changes automatically. We don't really notice the color temperature change when we walk into a room brightly lit with tungsten light bulbs, and we don't see the strong green component of standard office fluorescent tubes. We're also affected by our physical state, how much sleep we've had or how much sleep we need, how much alcohol or caffeine or Red Bulls are in our system, and our own individual ability to judge variations in color. Let's take a look at a couple of images that illustrate these limitations. In this image, the left rectangle looks lighter than the one on the right. They are, however, exactly the same shade. The background affects our perception to light and dark, and we're influenced by neighboring and surrounding tones. In this example, perhaps a bit more subtle, the center gray ring appears slightly lighter on the right side. If we remove the center blue bar, however, we see that the ring is in fact a solid color. This happens with colors as well. In this image, the blue bars on the left appear to be much lighter than those on the right. However, if we remove the black bars, we get to see that these blues are actually the exact same tone. Your eyes can even see movement where there isn't any. This is a static image, yet pieces seem to be slowly rotating. Stare at any circle and it stops. The circles you don't focus on continue to move. This image isn't about color, but it does illustrate how our eyes can be fooled. So let's take a question break to see if anyone has any questions. Just to summarize what we've covered so far, we've seen the monitor is that one of the best investments any photographer can make. Combined with the right hardware and software, what you'll see will be both accurate and consistent on your screen. When you can really see the true color and tonal range in your images, editing becomes easier and more consistent, and the result is better images in your books. So no questions so far, so let's take a look at monitor calibration and profiling. There are different sets of tools available to do this depending on your needs. So let's take a look at a couple of different levels in a little more detail. If you're not doing your own printing and you're sending out to a lab or having books printed, you need a colorimeter to calibrate and profile your monitor. The i1 Display 2 is a great choice for photographers using both labs and Blurb. If you're sending out your images for printing and you're doing some of your own printing, then you should take a look at the ColorMonkey Photo. The ColorMonkey Photo can quickly and easily create custom printer profiles for all papers you use, and also has the ability to calibrate and profile digital projectors. For more information on that ColorMonkey, visit colormonkey.com. And if any of you are out there with large format printers or high-end scanners that need to be calibrated, take a look at the i1 Extreme. The i1 Extreme can do ultra-precise profiles for monitors, printers, scanners, projectors, and cameras. If you think you might benefit from the advanced capabilities of an i1 Extreme, visit x-rite.photo.com for more information. So we've seen that we can't trust our eyes to calibrate and profile our computer's displays. Since the computer monitor is what we're most concerned with today, let's take a look at the I1 Display 2 and its easy-to-use software called I1 Match. When we start the I1 Match software with the I1 Display 2 plugged into a USB port, this is the start screen we're presented with. Now you see other devices on the screen, and they're grayed out because the I1 Extreme system uses the same software to calibrate these other devices. We talked about calibration settings before and why 6500K is the correct temperature, and 2.2 is for both Windows and Mac. For illuminance, again, right out of the box, most every monitor is way too bright. If you're in a bright working environment, the maximum brightness would be from 120 to 140 at tops. If you have a controlled working environment where the lights can be turned down, 80 to 100 will produce the most accurate results with the most viewable tonal range. Here we see the screen with the target calibration settings chosen. The default settings of 6500K white point and a gamma of 2.2 are shown. And if we click on the luminance drop-down menu, we see the recommendations for different display types. 100 for CRTs, 120 for LCDs. And if you're using a laptop, the recommendation is to use from 80 to 100. You're then directed to place the I1 on the screen. Tip your monitor back slightly, hang the device over the monitor so that it rests flush to the screen near its center. And a counterweight is supplied to keep it in place. After placing the I1 display on the screen, the software will first find the location of the device by splitting the screen into white and gray sections. Once the device has been located, color patches are sent to the screen. This entire process takes about 3 minutes. When completed, you're shown a graph of the red, green, and blue curves of your monitor. Kind of technical and not that important to know, although this graph over here does show you what kind of condition your monitor is in. If your monitor is really starting to age or has some sort of serious physical problem, then these three lines, which look like one line in this particular graph, will be split quite a bit, and that's an indicator that your monitor's got an issue. You're also given the option to see a before and after image. If this is the first time you're creating a monitor profile, the image might seem a little darker and yellower than you were used to. The difference is now you're actually seeing the correct data in your image file. We don't want our monitors to make the corrections. We don't want our monitors to make our images bright and saturated. We want to take control of how the images will look so that they'll print the way we expect. A great graphics monitor is one of the best investments any photographer can make. And if you combine it with the right calibration hardware and software, what you'll see will be both accurate and consistent. When you can truly see the color and tonal range in your images, editing becomes easier and more consistent. The result is better images in your books. And if we have no questions, we'll continue, but feel free. So soft proofing. Soft proofing can be one of the greatest tools to ensure correctly printed files. In essence, what Photoshop does is display on screen the effects an output profile has on your image. Based on what changes occur, you can make editing decisions with the soft proof preview turned on and make adjustments before you actually print. No more having to print 5 times to get one good print. And before we take a look in Photoshop Live, let's discuss rendering intents. Rendering intents deal with colors that are out of gamut. They're colors that perhaps your camera could capture, or even maybe your monitor can display, but the output device that you're printing to just cannot print that color. When you're in Photoshop, there are 2 choices for photos: relative colorimetric and perceptual. There are 2 other choices in there, but I'd recommend staying away from them. Now, rendering intent only deals with colors that are out of the device's gamut. If there are no colors beyond what the printer can print, then the rendering intent has no effect. Let's take a look at perceptual first. Perceptual rendering takes any color that is out of gamut and moves it back in. Any colors that are in the way, as represented in this circle here, are moved so that the relationship between the colors stays the same. This works very well for portraits or if you have an image that's got a lot of colors that are out of gamut. Relative colorimetric also takes any colors that are out of gamut and moves them back in. The difference is any colors that are in gamut stay where they are. The good part about this is there will be no tonal changes throughout the rest of the image. The possible negative can be, that is, if you have too many colors that are out of gamut, it can cause problems on fine gradations, and you might get noticeable bands in a very smooth gradation in your image. Now, before you start Photoshop, go to blurb.com and download the Blurb ICC profile for the printer. This file can be downloaded at the link you see here, and we will also email this to you at the end of the presentation. You can also use the built-in US web-coded profile, which is fairly close. As you can see in this graph, the white graph is the Blurb profile for the Blurb printer, and the color graph inside it is a generic CMYK profile. If you do use the generic CMYK profile, you can see you're losing about 5 to 10% of the available color gamut of that printer. So it's worthwhile to download the Blurb profile. Now, as we said before, the Blurb book printers operate in CMYK. This graph shows the difference between Adobe RGB, which is the white graph, and the color space of the HP 5000 Indigo printer. If your capture was originally in Adobe RGB and contains color outside of the printer color space, those colors will move according to the rendering intent that we spoke about earlier. Now, if you happen to be working in sRGB, sRGB doesn't cover all of the color gamut of the Blurb printers. Here we see sRGB in the white part of the graph, and we can see how much of the Blurb HP Indigo printer space is outside of sRGB. You're better off working in Adobe RGB before converting. Somebody mentions a question here. Is the Monaco Optics DTP94 still okay to use, or should you upgrade? As long as the device seems to be working fine, then there's no need to upgrade. All right, so we're going to open Photoshop in just a second. If, as a sidebar here, if you need to do very major edits to an image, then you should open the file in 16-bit if you're using Adobe's RAW converter. After you've completed your edits, then you would convert the file to 8-bit. Let's take a look at what happens here in Photoshop. So let's open an image. And we want to take a look and see how it's going to look when we send it out to print. And here's the one we want. Now, this image is currently in the ProPhoto RGB color space, which is a very large color space. And if we have a lot of colors outside of gamut, we're going to have some issues. So here's the process for soft proofing. We've got our image open. We go to View, Proof Setup, Custom. And from here, you might have just seen a color change. As I click on Preview, we're now looking at this image through the destination profile, which is the HP Indigo press. Now, if I chose another printer, or I took a look at this image in Adobe RGB, for example, which is a color space, I have no colors out of gamut. But what we want is the profile that we downloaded, and unfortunately, CMYK profiles go all the way to the bottom of your menu here, but here's the profile that we downloaded from Blurb. So we see with Perceptual, as we click this on and off, we have a fairly severe color shift in the blues, particularly in the sky and the water. Let's take a look at relative colorimetric for this image. And as we click on and off again, we see we have a blue loss. What this is telling us is that this image has a very saturated blue in it, and it's beyond the ability of the HP Indigo press to exactly match it. Now, if we go up to View, Gamut Warning, it will show us the areas of color in this particular image that are going to move. By the way, if we chose different rendering intents between relative and perceptual and nothing changes on the screen, then that means we don't have any colors that are out of gamut. So since we have a fairly large area in here that is out of gamut, we might want to make some adjustments. So let's turn the gamut warning off for a second. And you can see also as we turn off the proof colors, we can see we're losing some of that blue. So let's go into Photoshop, and I'm going to do a little curves adjustment here to try to bring up some more contrast and saturation. And I'm also going to just look at the blue channel, since that's what we were losing mostly, and try to boost that a bit. Okay, so we are looking at the colors with the proof colors turned on. So we're looking at this image, how it's going to print in the book. And as we turn off and on the curves adjustment we just made, we can see maybe we made it a little too light. So let's go back into RGB and darken the image overall a little bit. A little too much. Let's see how that looks. So now as we click this on and off and look at proof colors versus not, we've gotten somewhat closer. And this is where you have to adjust the image to your liking. Understand, as we said, that there are some colors that you just cannot print as intensely as you're going to be able to see on a screen. And when you're going out to paper, we're relying on the light in the ambient area to illuminate that print. Since our monitor is backlit with red, green, and blue, it has a different ability to show colors. But let's assume now we've got our image the way we like it. Now this image is ready to be converted. So let's just jump back into PowerPoint a second and see what we've had going on here. All right, so we've converted our image to 8-bit. We've gone into Proof Setup Custom, and in the device to simulate, you choose either the generic CMYK setting or preferably the custom Blurb HP Indigo profile, which we see here. Then we have to choose our rendering intent based on which we felt looked better for the image. You also have the option of to simulate paper color. Unfortunately, this is one of the weak parts of Photoshop. It has a tendency to make it way too extreme. And if we go back into Photoshop for a second and I click on Simulate Paper Color, it has a tendency to dull the image way too much. It's telling us now that this area here that used to be pure white is going to go that gray, and it's a little bit extreme. That said, black point compensation should be left on. Now, as one little final check, relative colorimetric versus perceptual. Now, for me personally, I like the way that perceptual opened up the shadows here in the middle of the boats. As we turn it down, we can see it gets a little dark. And again, this is personal preference here. I happen to like the perceptual rendering, so I'm going to keep that. So also, as I mentioned, when you turn on the gamut warning, you get to see any colors that will move, which means we are going to have to deal with the rendering intent here. And when you make an adjustment, make the adjustment on a layer. When you do the soft proof, those settings will stay on until you turn them off. And make sure to use an adjustment layer. Don't apply an adjustment directly to the image. If you think you might repurpose this file later, save the file as a PSD, which is a Photoshop native, or a TIFF with the layers intact. This allows you to go back and make edits, and then we'll prepare the file for conversion. After making any adjustments you might think necessary, after seeing the soft proof, go to Edit, Convert to Profile under the main menu. Choose the HP Indigo Press 5000 profile as the destination space. And this is what we'll see. The file, when it goes through this conversion, is also now converted to CMYK, since this is a CMYK profile. Save the file as a high-quality JPEG using the 12 setting, and then you're ready to place it into your publishing program, which we'll see in just a minute. Also, if any of you are working with Adobe Lightroom does not at this point support a CMYK workflow. If you need to do all your imaging editing in Lightroom, you're going to have to work with Adobe RGB or sRGB files. When preparing files for export for book printing from Lightroom, choose File, Export, and select the settings of JPEG and sRGB. The new files will reside in the folder you specified, waiting to be placed in your publishing program. Just so you know, Blurb will accept image files in any of the standard color spaces, be it sRGB, Adobe RGB, ProPhoto RGB, etc. However, if you don't color manage your images, the printer will convert all the files to CMYK without any input from you using its standard settings. This can cause tonal and color shifts that you might not have expected. By taking control of the process, you can be assured that the books you get back will have images that more closely match what you saw on your monitor. Somebody mentions, how much does your environmental light matter, or should you be working in an entirely dark space? Well, very few people have the option to work in an entirely dark space, but a room with subdued lights is the best choice. Unfortunately, we don't all have that luxury. We have to work in an office environment. At the very least, if your monitor has one available, buy the monitor hood for your monitor, which will shield out ambient light. If that's not an option, go to your local craft store and get yourself some matte black foam board and make yourself a monitor hood. That will help go a long way towards helping that. Also, somebody asks, is there any program other than Photoshop that you can use for soft proof? If you don't have Photoshop, unfortunately right now it's the only program that does do a completely accurate soft proof. Lightroom doesn't soft proof. Corel Painter doesn't completely soft proof. Photoshop Elements does not completely soft proof. That said, what you can do is they will show you gamut warnings. The general rule of thumb is if you've got a lot of color out of gamut, then perceptual rendering is going to work best. If you only have a little bit of color out of gamut, then relative colorimetric will work best for you. Someone also mentions that they've got a little banding in the sky in their images, and they want to know how to remedy that. If you've got banding going on in your images before you even did any edits to it, then you had a problem with your capture or your conversion. If you captured a file that is in RAW, and you think you're going to have to do some editing in it, and it has things like a very finely gradated sky, then I would recommend opening the file in 16-bit color first, and then do your edits. 16-bit color has a lot more tonal range to play with, even though in the end we're going to convert down to 8-bit. So do your edits in 16-bit, then convert the file to 8-bit before sending it out to Blurb. So we've gone through our edits, we've soft-proofed, we've exported our images from other programs. Our images are now ready. If you're a Blurb Booksmart user, you can simply add the images into your page layouts and send your book to Blurb. If you're using a page layout software like Adobe InDesign, you'll need to first lay out your book and create a PDF file for upload to Blurb. Let's take a look to see how to do this. Now we've already answered our questions. Let's take a look to see if there's any. Oh, someone mentions how to set up for black and white photos. Well, black and white photos certainly don't have any color issues to deal with, but they do have tonal issues to deal with. So it's still very important that you calibrate and profile your monitor because you need to get your monitor luminance or brightness under control. It's a very simple process, but you do need the hardware and software to do it. If you stay tuned at the end of the presentation, we'll give you some links to take a look at, and we'll also email you for some special offers if it's something you're interested in getting involved in. So let's take a look at what happens if we want to use a desktop publishing program like Adobe InDesign. Blurb now supports PDF printing from just about any page layout application. Let's take a look how to create a PDF by placing the image we were just working on into a page in InDesign. Before you get started with InDesign, however, also download the Blurb InDesign templates from blurb.com. This download will also provide a set of presets for a PDF export to ensure a smooth upload and a printing of your book. Here we see the file we were working on earlier. It's already been converted to the HB Indigo printer profile when we were in Photoshop, and then it was saved by default as a CMYK file. After you've finished your layout of your book in InDesign, make sure to pre-flight the pages. You can do this by choosing File, Pre-Flight. This window will show you all of the images that you've placed in your book so that you can make sure they've all been converted into CMYK. So right in the middle of the screen here, it will have the name of the image and the type. So you want to make sure that you have a CMYK file here. Since we loaded the Blurb presets, PDF presets into InDesign before we open the program, when we go to File, Adobe PDF Presets, we see a choice called Blurb PDF X3 Export Preset. This preset contains all of the correct settings we need to send a PDF to Blurb. So again, someone asked to confirm that they're asking, do you convert the profile and choose the HP Indigo ICC profile rather than sRGB before placing the image in Booksmart? You can still place your sRGB images in the Booksmart program. However, if you remember back to that graph we showed, sRGB is clipping off quite a bit of color that printer is capable of printing. If you work in the CMYK profile, you're going to be able to maintain much more of that color. So again, here we see the screen, File, Adobe PDF Presets. Since we downloaded the presets from Blurb, we now see an option at the bottom of this selection, Blurb PDF X3 Export Preset. One of the options of the Blurb PDF preset is after it's been exported, you can view your PDF in Acrobat Viewer. This is a good idea, and it lets you view and do a final check on your entire book layout before uploading. If you're sending a PDF file to Blurb, go to blurb.com and choose Use Your Own Program from the home page. And we can see that right here. Then click on Upload Your PDF and follow the on-screen instructions. Your upload will be checked by Blurb to make sure that the PDF is ready to print. You'll get an email where you can give the final OK for printing. If there are any problems or recommendations, you'll get an email that will list these as well, and you can make a choice to adjust or continue. Someone asked, how do you have a JPEG with CMYK profile? When we did that convert to profile using the HP printer profile, since that profile is for a CMYK printer, the JPEG takes on the CMYK profile color space along with it. With our color managed photos, the book you get back is going to have photos with the color and tonality you expected. Whether you're having 1 or 100 books printed, with images that have been color managed, you can be sure that your results are going to be accurate and consistent. So to sum up what we've covered, we've learned today that it's important to think about color and light. Custom white balance when possible, be consistent when not possible. When shooting in the sun, choose daylight rather than auto for your white balance. Having a neutral reference, such as a color checker or gray card, will make batch color processing much easier later. Next, any monitor that has not been calibrated and profiled is only going to cause you problems if you do any color editing on your images. Learn how to soft-proof in Photoshop. It allows you to make corrections before you ever make your first print. If Photoshop is not an option for you, make sure your monitor is calibrated and profiled so that the application you are using will do its best job in giving you an on-screen representation of the tonal range that's in your image. Lastly, convert your files to the Blurb profile using the preferences you made during the soft proof. This will ensure the optimal use of the HP Indigo's printer's color capabilities and produce the most accurate results. If you get color under control and use the right tools, your printing will improve dramatically. Photographic prints, inkjet printers, and Blurb books will all benefit from more accurate and consistent color. This is only possible using the right hardware and software to calibrate and profile your equipment. And as we mentioned earlier, we've got a special offer. As a thank you for attending today's webinar, we have a discount code where you can get $10 off your next order with Blurb. This promotion is valid until September 30th of this year, and you can use it one time. In addition, we'll be sending an email to everyone who attended with some special offers from x-rite on the x-rite equipment we mentioned, along with links where you can download this presentation, a PDF of the presentation with full notes view, and a PDF document titled Color Workflow for the Photographer, which has detailed explanations and step-by-step instructions on working with color in both Photoshop and Lightroom. Now, I understand we're going to have a quick guest visit with us. Chad, do we have you here with us today?
Hi there, Joe. Yeah, this is Chad.
And well, I'd like to welcome Chad Jennings from Blurb, who would just like to say a few words to you.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out today. As you know, color management and getting the best print possible is really important to everyone at Blurb, and trying to get you the best print results we can. So I really wanted to thank Joe for taking the time and working with us on such a detailed presentation. If you have additional questions or comments after that, you can actually send them to me at chad@blurb.com as well, or any of our customer support representatives can answer questions as well. If we need to look anything up, we'll look to Joe. Again, I think you'll find if you walk through this process, you'll end up with some of the best print results, because as Joe said, what we hear the most is people get their books back and sometimes they're darker than they expected, as well as what are some of the differences between using images within Booksmart versus our new PDF to book process. So I want to thank you, Joe, for walking us through that, and we'll have another of these webinars coming up in another couple weeks if you want to take it in again.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you all for attending. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you today. Again, following these guidelines with the best results in printing your photo in your books. Having the right to make sure your color work accurate, consistent. We'll also produce the best color possible. We'll respond to any questions that we're unable to give you during the presentation by email as soon as possible. Thanks again. Have a great day.